Okay. Um, I am here to tell you the story of two very important women. I'm going to tell you about one of them, and it is Sarah and Hagar. Um, Sarah, who was married to Abraham, and they lived in an area called U-R, which is in the Chaldean region. During this time, people tended to not believe in God. They believed in their own gods because I guess it depended on which area they lived in, and there was many gods that they instead believed in. However, Abraham, he had his first encounter with God during that time, and God told him that he had to take all of his possessions and his herds and his family and leave Ur. God didn't really tell him where to go, just told him you need to leave immediately. So, but God, being as gracious as he is, he led them step by step towards Canaan, which is where they're going to end up. During this trip, Abraham's family, the brothers, they all had wives, they all had children, and they all believed that Sarah and Abraham had no children, and they thought, well, it's because one of our gods cursed her, and therefore she can't have children. That was their belief, and of course we all know that that's not really true. They started out their trip, their journey, and at the start, Abraham told Sarah, he said, if we're in danger of getting stopped by Pharaoh's soldiers, and because Sarah was very beautiful, according to what I understand, and he said, if the soldiers come and they try to take you, you must tell them that I'm your brother. If you tell them I'm your husband, they're going to kill me. So Sarah said, okay, I will do that. And because Abraham had had an encounter with God, he and Sarah, they chose to believe in Jehovah God. So they wanted to do everything that God said and not believe in some of the other gods that so-called gods that everybody else believed in. Now, during their travels, sure enough, the soldiers came and found them, and they proceeded to take Sarah. Sarah, being a dutiful wife, she did tell them that, hey, that's my brother, no need to kill him, and they didn't. They let him live. However, they took Sarah to the Pharaoh because they thought she'll make a great part of his harem. So they took her to Pharaoh, but God, being as gracious as he is and just taking care of everybody, he protected her. And he interceded when Pharaoh was trying to make her a part of his harem. Pharaoh got scared and he let her go, said, she's a witch, she's cursed, I don't want anything to do with her. So he turned her loose and she went back to Abraham and the rest of the family. In the meantime, though, God had still been appearing to Abraham, and he kept promising him, you're going to be a great leader of nations. You will have, your descendants will be great leaders, and they will do great things. Your descendants will be as numerous as the stars. He believed him, and he was still hoping, but still Sarah wasn't having any children. She was still barren. finally she said, okay, I don't, I need to do something. I need to take action. I can't go on like this. So she decided to take matters into her own hands. She had a handmaiden, Hagar, and she thought, I have a better idea. I want to have a baby by surrogate. Hagar can have the baby. So she went ahead and she told Abraham that what she was going to do, and Abraham, wanting to please his wife, said, okay, send her in. We'll see if we can't have a baby for you. She kept insisting that God was keeping her from having a baby. She, I think, had just lost all hope and faith, but she really wanted one, so she thought, if God won't let me conceive, then I'm going to do it another way. So, as it turned out, 10 years had passed and still nothing, but as it turned out, Hagar did conceive, and eventually, while she was pregnant, and Sarah started having conflict in their relationship. I think Sarah was, her pride was really hurt because Hagar was the one that got pregnant and she didn't. However, God again appeared to Abraham and said, Sarah is going to have a baby in 1 year. Well, Sarah was already 90 years old. Abraham was 100. She, still didn't believe until finally, I guess, after a little bit, she discovered she was pregnant, and they were very, very joyful. She had the baby exactly a year when God told her she would, and they named him Isaac, as for God. That's what he told them to name him. In the meantime, when he was born, of course, Hagar already had her child, and Sarah, being a very caring mother, especially with everything she went through to have him, she thought, I have to protect him. And I don't like the way that Hagar and her son are treating Isaac. So she said, I think that I have to do something about it. So again, here she was making decisions that are not based in faith. She wanted to protect him, and which is the natural thing that a mother does. But her own pride and her bitterness, she didn't really know the consequences of what she was actually doing. She didn't know that eventually this would spur bitter consequences and relationships that were not good, and it's tragic because even today we suffer those consequences of her efforts. She decides that Hagar and her son must go, that they couldn't live with them anymore. So she talks to Abraham, and he says, well, she's your handmaid, so you do what you want with her. It's up to you. Once again, she goes about and plots out plans that are not based in faith. God has his own way of bringing about what he plans in his own time. She did not want to wait. She wanted them gone. She didn't trust God enough, and she didn't trust that Abraham's love for his son Isaac, who was the rightful heir. She didn't trust that he would love him enough to make sure that things went the way they were supposed to. So she sent them away, and it's like I said, it spurred a lot of bad relationships that even to this day they still go on. It's kind of she was a very complicated woman, but she was one that when you're not doing things according to God's plan and you don't wait for him, it doesn't always turn out good. Sometimes our plans are not the best. Sometimes you have to wait, and that requires a lot of patience, which she obviously didn't have. I didn't forget about Hagar. Nancy will tell you all about her. Thank you.
All right, so Hagar was a particular interest to me because years ago, I had taken a course on various religions. So they kind of just really touched really quickly on each religion, their origins, some of their beliefs, some of their things. And in that class, I learned that Christianity could be traced back to Isaac through Sarah, and Islam or the Muslim faith to Ishmael through Hagar. So when I started this exercise, I thought I would be focused on, see what happens when you don't trust God. Because as Connie mentioned, today, we still suffer, maybe suffer's not the right, we still have the ramifications of this decision back years and years and years ago. Because in Genesis 16:12, it said, and he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. And I'm talking about Ishmael. So today, there's still hostility between Islam and Christianity. So that's where I went. But as I'm studying more and more about Hagar, it's not exactly at all where it led me to. So it was kind of surprising where I ended up with Hagar. So in Genesis 16, Hagar is introduced to us as Sarah's maidservant. We don't know much about her history except that she's Egyptian. The assumption is that she joined them when Abraham had traveled through Egypt, because it says there in the Bible, Genesis 12:16, Abraham acquired sheep and cattle, men servants and maidservants, and camels. So that's generally the accepted idea of when Hagar joined Abraham and Sarah. So as Connie mentioned, Sarah decided to do things her own way and gave Hagar to be Abraham's wife, and she conceived. So when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to despise Sarah. And because of this, Sarah mistreated Hagar. So there's not much detail in Scripture, just one line, Genesis 16:6, and it says, then Sarah mistreated Hagar. What I'm thinking, she's pregnant, she's alone, she's got no support, she flees into the desert, so to almost certain death. I mean, she's pregnant. So it must have been pretty bad, right? You don't leave a situation because somebody's calling you names or, looking at you wrong. So I think it was pretty bad because she fled without, to face almost certain death. But in the desert, an angel of the Lord found her. So one thing I learned about that angel of the Lord is it's generally thought that that's actually God, not an angel, because this remember is before Jesus. So they referred to that as an angel of the Lord. So God appeared to her, called her by her name, and commands her to go back to her mistress and submit to her. So here you have someone who's run into the desert, almost certain death, and God tells her, go back. So I'm thinking, why would he do this? Because God's plan is better than ours, And her returning would have assured her survival, and Ishmael's. And it would also position Ishmael to receive the blessings that was promised to Abraham. Because in Genesis 16:10, he says to Hagar, I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count. Sound familiar? So the same promise he gave to Abraham, he's now giving not just to Sarah, but to Hagar. The only difference is that through Sarah and Isaac, we get salvation. Through Hagar and Ishmael, we do not. But not only does Hagar return, but she praises the Lord and names him El Roy, the God who sees me. And one thing I found in my research is they said that this is the only person in the Bible to name God. So I didn't get a chance to dig into that too much. But when I thought about it, I thought, mostly God's naming himself to people. I am this, I am that, I am that. So I didn't really find any other instances in the Bible, but they say that Hagar was the only person in the Bible to actually give a name to God. So later on, in Genesis 21, so 10 years have passed, as Connie said. So Ishmael's grown up. He fulfills his promise to Sarah. She gives birth to Isaac. Actually, they said Ishmael would have been about 14 then. And then after Isaac was weaned, which they generally say is mostly around the age of 2, they have the big feast. And then Sarah went to Abraham and asked them to send Hagar away because she felt Ishmael was mocking. In my head, I'm thinking, I have 2 sons as well, and they are almost 20 years apart, so I kind of have them. And we were thinking when we had our youngest, oh, we're not going to get all those, he's touching me, for all these kind of issues, but guess what? We did. So I'm thinking it was probably normal sibling rivalry, and so she didn't like it. That's what I think when I say mocking. But either way, Sarah did not want Ishmael around to share Abraham's inheritance. So again, Hagar finds herself in the desert wandering, and eventually they run out of water, and Ishmael can't continue any further. So he's 16-ish. He can't go on any further. She doesn't want to see it, so she lays him under a bush, and she goes off not to see it. Ishmael's crying, Hagar's crying, and God hears them and calls out again to Hagar and says, do not be afraid, and repeats his promise to her again. I will make him into a great nation. Then God opens her eyes, she sees a well, and brings the water, and she goes and brings water to Ishmael. And then it says in Genesis 21:19, it says, God was with the boy as he grew up. And then we later learn that Ishmael also fathered 12 sons, which I didn't know. So again, the same promise. He fathered 12 sons, 12 princes. And it also says that his numerous descendants lived in hostility toward all of their relatives. They repeated that. So again, hostile relations between Ishmael's descendants and Isaac's descendants that we see today as well. But what I learned through the story of Hagar is not what I thought. The first thing I learned was about God's justice and mercy. Hagar was Egyptian. She was an outsider. She was a maidservant, but God saw her. He saw her pain and he intervened. He saw someone who'd been mistreated and he showed her compassion. He had concern for the outcast. So God acknowledged Hagar, he blessed her and offered her a promise too. So what this teaches me is that we have to have compassion towards others, no matter who they are. We have to treat everyone, particularly those in vulnerable positions like Hagar was, with dignity. The second thing I learned is to have hope in God's plan. That even when circumstances seem impossible, God's power can bring life out of a hopeless situation. Even when people sin or don't follow God's plan, like Sarah, or when systems fail, God is aware and compassionate. The last thing I learned, and this isn't really grounded in anything but by what I felt, was Hagar's faith. So I asked myself, was her faith stronger than Sarah's? Right? Sarah took matters into her own hands. She didn't have faith in what God promised her. But Hagar in the desert, God tells her to go back, and she does, without question. She not only goes back, but she worships him and praises him and gives him a name. and trust him. So in my mind, Hagar's faith was almost greater than Sarah's because she trusted him and what he said to her. So what I learned is that if you've ever felt invisible, unknown, or unheard, God sees you, knows you, and hears you. So trust in him and his plan for your life.